You're listening to Chicago Stories, a podcast from City Hall featuring the stories of everyday Chicagoans, as told to Mayor Emanuel.
Mayor Emanuel, Chicago Stories. We have Mario Van Peebles, and depending on how close we are, I get to call you Chip, which is your other name.
It's all good.
You can, say, go back to Mario. I don't like it as much as I used to.
Yeah, we'll stay with Mario. We'll go over. Segue to Chip later.
A great director. So tell me first about your new movie and your TV show, and then the revolution that's happening in both film and television.
Right.
And 20 words or less, please.
20. That's going to be. I grew up with Melvin Van Peebles and Maria, my mom, and my dad once said, if you're lucky, maybe it's the mother that shows you the mountain, gives you that sense of self and love. And if you're really lucky, the father that can teach you how to climb that mountain. And I lucked out. We traveled all through Europe with my mom and dad. And then at a certain point.
When you were young?
When I was a kid. So, je parle un peu de français, but I speak a little French, a little Spanish, a little Ebonics. I'm pretty well-rounded. And I saw my dad making change in cinema. Here's the fun backstory. My granddad, by the way, I got every flavor in my family. I got white, black, green, yellow. My aunt's gay, so I got to love everybody. If I throw a boomerang at anybody.
You should definitely run for the Democratic nomination for president, man.
There you go. I got locked in.
You're a walking coalition.
And so the genetic boomerang will hit me back in the head if I say anything. But my black granddad taught himself to read at age 14, came up from the South.
Where?
And he came up to Chicago, stopped the lynching in the South at 14, taught himself to read. And he eventually owned a tailor shop. And
You sure you're not Jewish?
I know, it sounds like it, right? He put my dad to work in the tailor shop when my dad was 8. And there was a store in the neighborhood that was refusing to hire black drivers. And my grandfather took my dad with him, and they went to the store, and they wouldn't hire black drivers to deliver the bread. So my granddad took out all the bread, and he would step on it.
Really?
And he said, and I'm going to come back here every day until you guys start hiring some drivers of color in these neighborhoods. And eventually, lo and behold, they did. And my dad thought that was his first lesson, that you could affect change.
In political activism.
And with stomping the bread, right? And so he went into the business he loved. My granddad then started doing fairly well economically. And his friend called him Peebles, said, Peebles, what kind of Cadillac are you going to get? And he said, well, I'm not going to get a new Cadillac. I'm going to send my son to this place called college. Changed our family dynamic. My dad went to college, met my mom, eventually traveled with me to Europe, became a film director. 1971, he made Sweetback. I'm giving you the whole family history. I'm backing way up because that's our Chicago roots. But I saw him early on making movies that entertained us, but saying something. Flash forward to 1991 when I did New Jack City. Flash forward again to now. And I keep seeing all these headlines about this uniquely American phenomenon of mass shootings. Australia had a mass shooting. They had a big buyback program with weapons. They took those weapons off, and they don't have them anymore.
Right.
You could still have a nut drive with a car and swords or whatever, but
it basically has worked.
It's worked. So I keep looking at these mass shootings and thinking, this is affecting all of us. These bullets don't care what side of the aisle you're on. They don't care if you're black or white. They don't care whether you believe in it or the Second Amendment. They will get you. Bullets are very democratic. So I thought, could I make a film that took us inside the head of a guy who was a potential mass shooter? And I called the film Armed. And so I made Armed independently. I went to the studios first. And
they all said no?
Studios said, could you do it more? They said, could you take the urban angle on this, meaning black on black crime would be remarkable. And I said,
thanks for the translation.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, but I had to get it in my head. But I wanted the film to be people of all colors, and I said, look, because they said that way we know the target audience. I said the target audience is Americans, because all of Americans are potentially the next target of a mass shooting. So let's show all of Americans. And I made Armed independently. The NRA says nothing stops a bad guy with a gun like a good guy with a gun. I play a good guy with way too many guns who's on the no-fly list. And we just got a great review from the military.
Why do you think you did the PTSD as the route to the shooter versus any other kind of emotional other type of...
I wanted... Listen, let me just say, Armed is It's a thriller. So this is not a documentary. First of all, when you see it, it's an exciting thriller. We just won the Audience Award at the Newark International Film Festival. So this is a movie that real folks go to and go, oh my God. The first 2 acts, you're going to sit there and go, I don't know what's going on. It's only in that third act reveal that you reveal you're inside my character's head and seeing it from his point of view. And then everything you've seen will suddenly make sense in the movie. So what I liked was playing a guy that was affable, that was likable. Like they say, nothing stops a bad guy with a gun like a good guy with a gun. He's a self-avowed good guy, and yet the guy's on the no-fly list. So it was interesting to say, I'm not playing this guy as a nutcase and not playing him as an enemy of the state. I'm playing him as a guy who knows he's struggling, but he's essentially a good guy. And yet he winds up being a very dangerous guy. So I wanted that angle so that you were sympathetic with. It's almost like Spielberg did. Remember in Jaws? Yeah. Very cleverly as a director, what he did, because the shark kept breaking down, was he put us in the point of view of the shark. So the first time we see those little vulnerable human legs on the top of the water kicking and boom, 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 and you move in. But now you see, every time you swim in the ocean, you see that shot. You say, oh, that's what my legs look. I wanted to put us in the head of a guy who could explode. And that's a really interesting,
that's a different perspective,
a very different perspective, because then you have sympathy for the devil, you have sympathy for someone else, and he's a good dude. And at the end, he realizes what's going on. And
so I want to pull a different string.
Yes,
you got like 20 strings.
I got a lot of strings, brother.
So you still, in this moment in time, which is unique, very successful directors of not only television but clearly film, and yet you still, all the major houses told you Unarmed, it's got to be an urban situation. Mario, you can't do the mass shooter or something else. Even now, in what I wouldn't even call it a renaissance, but this window of opportunity and openness and accessibility for African-American directed films that don't have to be just about the African-American experience.
Exactly.
So why?
Well,
even now.
I think part of it is, here's an interesting thing. Let's go back to, you talked about my pop, Melvin Van Peebles. Okay. I made a film in 2004 that I did independently, called Badass, which is about my father's experience making Sweet Sweetback's Badass song in 1971. I was a kid on that set making, when he did that, and he was acting, producing, directing, writing. And I watched him make that movie, and it really hit me that if you take McDonald's money, you can't make Supersize Me. If you take the system's money, you're beholden to the system's zeitgeist. Right? The golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rule. So now, at the same day that I brought Badass out, this big studios made a film called Soul Plane. And the LA Times wrote, these two films come out simultaneously. Soul Plane, with a lot of great actors of color, says subliminally that the idea of black folks running an airline is laughable. Badass says that the idea of a black director with a multi-culti crew and a multi-culti cast can make a hit film. And it's a message of empowerment across color lines. When you start to empower across color lines, that seems to be something that's a little more threatening to the status quo. And there's historical precedent for this. Dr. King stayed at the Baptist church, not a problem. But you start linking up with rabbis and Christians and marching on Washington and taking a stance on economics and a stance on the Vietnam War, you're broadening the base. That's a problem, and you'll be taken out. Malcolm comes back from Mecca. Says, I no longer see white folks as the blue-eyed devils. I think it's where your spirit and your soul are, not the color of your skin. And he starts talking about going onto the world stage of the UN, and you get taken out. The Black Panthers started linking up with the Brown Berets and the Mother Country Radicals and expanding the base, and then crap happens. So if I stay in the hood cinematically, and sometimes I may choose to. I may say, I want to make New Jack City. That's one type of movie. But if I say, no, I'm going to say something that I'm not going to tell Americans what to think, but I'm going to make them, when they see Armed, they're going to think. And they may like it or they may hate it, but they won't forget the movie. I can guarantee you won't be bored. When I worked with Clint Eastwood on Heartbreak Ridge, he said, beat me, whip me, but never bore me. And I don't bore you. I don't bore you in Armed. But I'm not doing it as a uniquely black experience, because gun issues, our gun phenomenon is uniquely American. There's no other developed country that has it. We have more gun violence and more guns and people than any other developed country in the world. And it's kind of crazy. So I wanted people to think before the midterms, in the studios would have slowed it down. They would have watered it down and homogenized it. And I'll forget all the things we said today, because the next movie I make might be Revenge of the Ninja Bimbos, and it'll have no nutritional value whatsoever.
What I've read about it, and I want to go see it, is that it's going to widen the definition, and from the perspective of people that are doing the shootings, and that we have a unique phenomenon in America.
Yes.
As somebody who was responsible for Clinton passing the assault weapon ban,
Right.
which by one vote
that expired, right?
Yes, expired under George Bush.
Yes.
Hasn't been renewed since.
Yes.
And then people were got to get this across. They'll take it out. And then people said that Bill Clinton did small things. Try doing an assault weapon ban.
That's a big thing.
Yes, but now let me ask you, on the topic of guns, why do you think America has this fixation, fascination? And then the second, who was more politically influential in your life, your mom or your dad? And if both, which one led you?
Good questions, man. You can call me Chip now.
No, I can?
Yeah.
Okay. I got this family psychology. I'm a middle child, you know. Yeah. When you're attacking me, ask a very piercing question. Get out of the kitchen.
Well, I have some, we can talk more later, but I've got some long answers on this. Why is it a uniquely American problem? Well, first of all, if you look at the history of America, it's built on this nightmare of slavery. And I believe that the colonial mentality is ultimately destroys everything it touches. Because if you buy into racism, that's around the corner from sexism. And sexism is down the street from classism. And that's around the corner from the wholesale destruction of Mother Nature. So if you say it's okay to exploit people of color and take their land, it's okay to repress women, and it's okay to cut down Mother Nature, sooner or later, you're going to wipe yourself out. So we have to get out of that mentality. But I think what happened was, since the Civil War, we went, typically when you win a war, right, you occupy the territory you won. You defeat Japan, you put a base there, you don't let them have certain weapons, and you take over. Same thing with Germany. But in a civil war, what do? Now you want to unite the country again. You're not supposed to leave behind an armed body, an armed militia with weaponry, right? So we go into the South and we win the war. We say, hey, you can't, these black folks, you can't enslave them anymore. We're going to consider them sort of 3/5 of a human being. We'll do this weird vote thing. We're not.
But that's before the Civil War.
Before the Civil War.
Right.
But then we go down and we sort of technically free people, right? At gunpoint. So now you can't kill your black folks the normal way. You got to put a sheet on. Okay, put a sheet on your head. Life goes on. Eventually folks get the right to vote. Women get the right to vote. And now we go back down there and say, you got to go to school with them. And George Wallace stands in the door. And again, at gunpoint, with the National Guard at gunpoint, you go down there and make those schools and lunch counters integrated. So we've had a history with this gun stuff and North versus South and being forced to do things that the South, the slave-owning states, didn't want to do. And so I think at a certain point, keeping those guns has become a sort of a sense of pride to certain states that don't want to acknowledge the federal government. And so I think that the whole gun issue is actually rooted in, that whole snake that says don't tread on me.
Constitution?
No, I think it's rooted in something else that's way deeper than that. The sense that I don't want you to take my guns. I don't want you to know how many guns and who got them. Look, they've got smart guns now. Just like you can put your thumb on an iPad and trigger the iPad because it knows it's you. They got smart guns that only if you had your smart gun, only you could operate it. But the NRA doesn't want that.
I just think it's embedded in the American experience. And I don't think they're right about the Second Amendment. I don't think they're right about the interpretation. I've read plenty of stuff on this. And I think it's a bastardization of the Constitution and the Second Amendment and everything that relates to the militia, which no individual is about. So that, to me, is, and I do think America has a fascination with guns that no other country or people have, and that means it has some historic significance, which is not healthy, but it also exacerbates our differences. I got to get one thing though. You didn't tell me about. Who was more?
I'm listening. This is fun.
No, okay. Who's more influential, mom or dad, in your politics?
Mom. If I condense down what mom would say, she'd say, "Be a good person. Be good to the planet."
Okay.
My dad would say, "Make stuff happen and don't complain." Make it happen. If I mix the two of those together, it would be make stuff happen be a good steward to the earth and make stuff happen. I think that's mine. What's yours?
Muhammad Ali's quote. So my mother runs CORE in Chicago, Congress on Racial Equality, late 50s, early 60s.
Right.
My grandfather's the old socialist who abandons socialism because of Roosevelt and the Hitler-Stalin Pact.
Okay.
And he's an old, one of the 12 lost tribes, Democrats. Okay. He was a total Democrat. I remember my family, my mother and my grandfather on my mother's side, yelling about Wallace, not George, Henry Wallace. My mother was for him breaking with Truman. My grandfather said it was one of the greatest sins. You shouldn't go against it. And it was like, that's how our family was. My dad...
So you had an interesting political discourse at the dinner table.
My dad comes to America in 1959 and barely can speak English and quits the AMA, trying to start a medical practice over national health care. And so family discussions are all about big P politics, not like electoral politics.
Right.
So that's kind of like I grew up. That's how, but both sides influence you because it's about values and about what you find your mission. And, but I was going to tell you this quote, which I think you would like, which is Muhammad Ali's, "The service we give others is the rent we pay for being here on earth."
I got a Muhammad Ali quote for you. That's a lovely quote. We were working here in Chicago. I was playing Malcolm X.
Where?
And I play in the movie Ali.
Right.
And he would come down to the set and he'd look at me and go, "Van Peebles, if you were a smarter boy, I'd enjoy your company." And he was the one that said, if you could make a movie about the world's first Black Power athlete, could you do one about the world's first Black Power filmmaker? And that became my challenge to make Badass, my film with my dad. And Michael Mann, who said the first time he saw my dad's film was at the State and Lake Theater here in Chicago. And Michael was directing Ali, and so he came on as the producer of Badass. So it all happened right here in Chicago.
So you've seen
But I like that. Let me go one more quote for you. The Western man says, "We inherit the land from our forefathers." And the Native American says, "No, you borrow it from your children."
That is 100% the truth. So I'm going to get back to your environmental days, because the road from the New York State environmental or New York City?
New York City.
Environmental Department.
Department of Environmental Protection.
Is a natural precursor to working in film and television, isn't it?
Absolutely, makes sense.
So what is your sense of the film and television?
Where the industry is now?
Yeah,
in
the
Chicago?
industry in Chicago.
I think it's kind of rolling along pretty well.
Yeah,
You've
seen it different.
I'm here directing Proven Innocent.
I see. Okay.
Proven Innocent is a group of attorneys who do pro bono work proving that people that are a lot of cases are innocent. They're taking on some really interesting cases. Been working on Empire for a while. I acted, like I said, in Ali a few years back. I directed Boss with Kelsey Grammer playing the mayor.
Yeah.
He's also in Proven Innocent. I've enjoyed working here, and it seems to be working pretty well. It seems to be pretty efficient. Good crews, some good actors, good theater actors. I enjoy it, man.
Now, how'd you get into this? The new
Proven Innocent?
Yeah, the new movie.
They called me up and asked me. This is a TV series,
right?
So this is Danny Strong's putting it together, and I still haven't fooled. No one's fired me yet. They still reach out to me and say, "Come in and do it." And this particular episode, the attorneys wind up trying to prove that a white supremacist is innocent, and he is innocent, but he's guilty of other things, and so it sort of becomes a very tricky story.
Why do you think more political stories are coming about than there was the kind of homogenous vanilla yogurt?
Why now?
By
the way, I just saw a good film the other day called The Hate You Give, which is also very great.
The Hate You Give?
It's a new movie, came out, yeah.
I don't know it.
Yeah, it's good. I think you're seeing films like what I did, Armed. We're going to see The Hate You Give. I think what happens is that in the Depression, people wanted comedies and musicals as a counterbalance.
Yeah.
I think now, because there's such a vacuum of moral leadership and from the top, that you're seeing
the reaction,
people stepping into the void. You're seeing people going, "We're not going to reduce our emissions, or let more gas go into the air." You're seeing CEOs say, "We're not going to sell guns to kids under 21 or whatever that is." You're seeing people fire Roseanne, for example. You're seeing people fill the void, having to fill the void in a way that maybe we didn't before. You're seeing, athletes who unfortunately sometimes forget to vote taking a knee. I think you should do both.
No, you have to.
you know. So, but you got to, you got very important. That's why I made, you asked me about making Armed. I made it to come out around the midterms because I didn't want to tell Americans what to think, but I wanted to be a part of making America think again. So I think we're seeing people step up to the plate.
Kind of like being great again.
In the absence, in the absence of leadership from the top. I think we're seeing such a void and such a blatant void, unfortunately, that people are saying, this can't be real.
Do you prefer working in television or film? Or and do you like the theater itself?
TV is more of a writer-producer medium. Film is a director's medium, and theater really is more of an actor's medium. Because once actors on that stage, that you don't call cut. They're doing it. They're doing the lines, everything. But as a director,
say that again. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys all know it, but us.
So directors, features are a director's medium. Theater is really an actor's medium, and television is a writer-producer medium. There you go. You'll give me that.
Well, no, I'm only looking at it because I'm going to throw that at Ari the next time we have a family dinner. I'm going to try to act like I'm really smart and I got some insight. I said, this is the way you got to look at it. No, that's do you have a preference, or you like to do all three, and therefore, and are you working on multiple projects at a time? Is it hard to juggle that?
I grew up in a by any means necessary filmmaking family. So you grew up in an independent filmmaking family, like growing up on an independent farm. You learn how to plow the North 40, feed the chickens, take care of the horses. In filmmaking, I learned a little bit about camera. I learned about lighting, about scripts, and ultimately it comes down to your people skills, because you're going to still be dealing with people. So I grew up thinking that it was all part of the zen of filmmaking. Now later on, it's this is directing, this is writing, but I sort of am comfortable, wearing different hats. And sometimes, like in Ali, I just played Malcolm X. And Badass, I produced, wrote, directed, and acted. In Armed, I produced, wrote, directed, and acted. And I've worked with guys like Clint Eastwood, who, when I did Heartbreak Ridge, he acted and directed. So it depends on what's needed.
You see his new movie yet, Mule?
I have not.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. Do you like working with him?
I love working with him.
Why?
He's easy with himself. I always think there are three loves in life for me in my career. Love what you do, which I do. Love and enjoy the people you do it with. And love what you say with your work. And if you get all three of those to line up, that's pretty cool stuff. And
you think he's like that?
He does what he wants. We have differences. But I got to tell you, Clint Eastwood is the guy that gave me my first shot in Heartbreak Ridge, and then introduced me to Warner Brothers, where I met Terry Semel and Bob Daly, who were the Warner Brothers brass. Right. And that's where I got to direct New Jack City, because of him. So I directed New Jack City for Warner Brothers, because they needed a blackologist, and I was like, hey, I'm here.
Look at me.
Spike's busy. And I got in to direct it, and then when New Jack City came out, Clint wrote me this great letter, and he said, last night I saw a great movie directed by Stitch Jones. And that was my character in Heartbreak Ridge. So, when you work with good people that deliver, you tend to do it again and again and again, man. If someone's inviting you back to the cinematic picnic, that means you did something right.
Is there anybody you haven't worked with that you would like to work with?
I'm always surprised. People come up to me. I worked with Ava DuVernay on a pilot that didn't go. I really enjoyed working with her. But when I did Armed, I wound up putting Van Jones from CNN in it. He's just this brother who's speaking truth to power, and I liked him, and I reached out to him, and so I always find new folks. I also worked on Armed. Because I self-funded. My son Mandela came in and to me said, "Hey, I saved my money from the last two movies I acted in." He acted in Roots and Jigsaw, and I want to give you that money. And my daughters worked.
Did he get a piece of the?
He made his money back. Yeah, absolutely. If you're a Van Peebles, you're going to work a little longer, a little harder, and and you better not be the weak link. And he came in and did his thing, and then my daughters worked on it.
Can I say one thing?
If they don't work in the business, at least they'll learn work ethic, and I love being bilingual with your kids.
You have no problem encouraging your children to go into the entertainment /
on the other hand, I have a tough love dad. And in my family, you never misinterpreted people you love with people who are good at what they think they love to do. For example, my mom loves to act, but she's a terrible actress. I would never hire her. Now my daughter...
Does she know that?
She does. Yeah, but
Does
she still loves
does
Dad.
Does she still love you?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's the thing. See, my first play that I gave to my dad, it was a brilliant play. I said, "What do you think, Dad?" He said, "It's a piece of crap." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Do you think it needs a polish?" He said, "You can't polish crap." Now he stayed with me to work on another one that I did later, and I sold. But we have a kind of a tough love family, so there's no sugarcoating it.
Right.
Me
It's raw.
loving somebody doesn't mean
I think you
that
would
I
fit
think
in with my family really well.
Yeah. So
We tell everybody-
you got to tell them like it is, and you may be wrong. Look,
Not possible if you want to argue to the end.
so who would I want to work with? Working with Ali was genius. He was such a. I enjoy being around people who are okay with who they are, who enjoy life. I've noticed that in any field, that if I'm with people who are good at what they do and really enjoy it and are comfortable with themselves, I'm happy. That's a good start. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about politics not from the art perspective?
I have.
Because you worked in public service.
Yeah, well, I worked in public service, Department
Is that
of
environmental thing all mom? I don't mean that. Your
No,
dad
not
was,
all mom. No,
Yes.
it's partly, well, it's both.
Right.
It's growing up with parents who are very engaged, in the 60s. We're not a materialistic clan. We don't, we value education and travel. That's it. And all the other the silly stuff you can buy with your own money, but education and travel. Dr. King has a great saying. So this part of this is mom and dad, and I can really screw up a quote like no one else. Dr. King says, "We either learn to live together as brothers and sisters in harmony, or we all perish together as fools." I think with what I just showed you and what I've seen, that now we either learn to live together as brothers and sisters, all of us in harmony, also with nature, or we perish together as fools. So I think the two are connected. Remember what I said about racism, classism, and my isms, and then
Right.
it leads to the destruction of nature. That same bully colonial mentality is connected.
What did you do in New York in the environmental office?
I worked on the budget. I was an economics major at Columbia University. I worked on the budget. I tried to propose things that I felt we could do that wouldn't hurt the quality of water or the environment, only to find out that there were a lot of other interests weighing in, and it was a little bit discouraging.
So what was your, welcome to, it's one of the things I'm proud
But
of.
here's the thing.
We used to have 2 coal plants operating in the city. The last big city with coal plants, in Pilsen and in Little Village, and we shut them down my first year.
Good.
After 20, yeah.
Did you retrain those folks?
Well, we got them other jobs.
There you go.
And we're
That's
now
right.
in the process, on one of the facilities, we're changing it around so it's not just a blight of a closed coal plant
Right.
in the city.
Right.
But it's,
But here's the thing, right? You asked about politics and the dynamic with politics and culture. If there's a quote, I think it's Lincoln, but I'm not going to even go there, where someone says, "He or she who affects the opinion of the people, the culture, has almost as much power as he or she who makes the laws." Right?
I could even argue based on
When
everything I've said.
apartheid fell, South African apartheid fell, their 2 favorite shows they're watching? Miami Vice with a white leading man and a black leading man, and The Cosby Show. 20 years before we have the Obamas, we had the Huxtables. You had to have it. We want to be the success we see. So if we see something long enough, especially in television where it comes into your room, and you make friends with it, 20 years later, the ripple effect is.
There's no
is
doubt.
there.
I agree 100%.
I mean, my dad did Sweetback in 1971, not knowing that there were kids out there watching a black director make a hit film that would outgross Love Story. Kids who would one day grow up saying, "Hey, I'm Spike Lee. I'm John Singleton. I'm Mario Van Peebles."
Have you seen The Black Klansman?
I thought he did a great job.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite Spike movies. Yeah, I thought it was good. So, but that affects things, right? So
Yes.
what we do in media, if I make Armed and I can say, "Here's a good guy with a gun," and he's not an awful guy, so you got to look at this problem a different. You can't otherize him the same way because you kind of like him and get inside of him. Now, what do you do when you go, "Whoa, this guy can get easy access to weapons of war"? And at the end of Armed, I show you all the real guys it's based on because it's based on all real stories. That's fun. So if I can take that audience and say, let's get them motivated, maybe if I can get them thinking while they're consuming their art, maybe
I have
they'll
a
think
theory.
when they vote. What do you think? They think
Without a doubt.
when they vote,
yeah.
and that's what you guys pick
Okay.
up.
Well, It's an ongoing dialogue.
Only you have to wear a suit all day. I can wear other stuff.
Yeah,
Look like
don't
me.
worry.
Yeah.
You got your uniform. I got. Don't give me. We both got uniforms. All right. Here we do a rapid section.
A rapid set or a rapping set?
No,
because I can
rapid
freestyle.
answers.
Okay,
You got,
I'm
yes,
just
no,
gonna-
man.
all right.
It's real quick.
Okay.
You'll get this.
All right.
Thick or thin pizza?
Thin.
Okay. The lake or the river?
River.
Sears or Hancock?
Sears.
Okay, Sears Tower. Okay. Cubs or Sox?
Cubs.
Okay. 16-inch or 12-inch softball?
Undecided.
Undecided?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever played 16-inch?
No.
Then you're for 12-inch. I'll just vote for you.
I have a certain
Mario Van Peebles, this is Chicago Stories. Thank you for being here, man. Thanks for making time.
You're welcome. This is fun to do. I would continue this. You guys can contact me, follow me on Instagram, Mario Van Peebles on Instagram, or on Twitter, and tell me what you think of Armed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're definitely going to go see it.
And then please get out and vote.
Oh, you don't have to worry about that.
Not
for
you.
me.
These
No.
other folks.
No, they got to get out and vote.
Get out and vote.
Yeah. I think what happened this last 3 weeks is really bad.
I think it's really bad. I don't know.
And that people are willing to destroy institutions for power.
You have people leaving that party, the Grand Old Party, now.
For good reason.
That are thinking people, and we need two parties. We need a thinking Republican Party.
Yeah, well, I used to say, and I still believe this, I don't know, well, it's not used to, but I'm not sure they're leaving the Republican Party so much as this is.
It's the party's left them?
Yes.
Well, they got trumped.
You've been working on that before. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Chicago Stories with Mayor Emanuel. You can subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tweet your guest ideas using hashtag ShyStories. Thanks for listening.